But first of all, hi everybody. My name is Richard. I'm the current team director of subscriber retention for the Daily Beast. Prior to this, I was with USA Today as their head of churn, subscriber churn, and man, done so many things as far as aspect of just kind of like news media. I've been in news media for approximately almost like about 14, 15 years now, and it's been one of those um, blessings that I kind of like never really anticipated. I think that one of the valuable things in life that this concept of giving me has given me news media. I mean, it's just been um, more or less being able to amplify who I was, uh, teaching me more about who I was, and just through the ups and downs and tumultuous years and the great years and all those things. One of the things that I discovered was, it's been such a great concept that's given so much to me in my career and my relationships with people. And I'm a big believer in those who kind of the universal gift to those who give back to the universe. So one of the things that I definitely wanted to do, when I was approached about this, was make sure that the information and just sometimes even just the third party, if not direct, experience that I did have just in watching and observing so many different great leaders, great mentors, managing others myself on so many different planes. I wanted to give this information back. And for whatever it's worth, sometimes I just like to put things out in the universe and just hope that it affects just one person, just helps one person. I'm a big, personality that just likes to help almost to an altruistic, uh, lens. But I just believe in the grace of just always kind of like just helping others wherever I can. And with that said, I'll kind of go ahead and jump in. But I was, I'm actually a product of literal, really great immediate management and mentorship. I think a lot of you, on this call, like knew Royce Miles. He's the reason I'm in Milwaukee. Him and I, we're close in a way that was a little unique. He taught me a lot. He was big on making sure that I didn't mold into what others thought I should mold into. He was big on you be who you want to be. You don't have to be a superhero for anybody. You don't have to set a standard for anybody. You be who you are, and you make sure that when you have the opportunity, you give things back to people. That's just the kind of guy he was. He was my GM at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and also too, who's not up here is George Stanley, which you guys probably know as well. Even just through conversations with George, it's been great, such a great blessing just to work with him as well. And obviously Steve Lyles, who was a great mentor to me. He directly managed me at LPI, but him and I were like office mates at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. So he was the first kind of guy who really did a big reading for me. And if you guys know his heart and his spirit, he was always really big about the camaraderie and making sure that you were you, and making sure that people felt not only that the business side was important, but how their role in the business side makes sense. And therefore, throughout my career, I was able to kind of be a vessel for a lot of that energy, that love, that, just understanding. And in particular, one of the things that I think is really propelled me is the enhancement of, I think, what was already there, which was a natural ability of human empathy. Being able to kind of like just understand where people are psychologically, emotionally, in their past, and they kind of helped me not only really peel that onion back to kind of like analyze and assess so that I can live both in the present, past and future of all the things that are going on with people, but also too that I can understand how to build a better relationship, to optimize output, make sure that everybody was focused on the task at hand, and then naturally, achieve objectives and goals. So this is kind of what I want to give back, is just that ability to, do that. I think that um, I was always kind of just a sponge for a lot of that knowledge anyway. And I think that as I became more confident and the wisdom that they bestowed upon me, I began to realize how much of an impact and how much of an effect it has on not only people who in generations before me, but also to the generations that were coming right after me as well. So if anything, it became kind of like this responsibility that I began to teach to others, and then I learned that it became one of these things where literally the future of news media is kind of in our hands a little bit as to like how we inevitably adapt to the upcoming seasons of news media and what that future looks like. A little bit more background on kind of like why why I'm here is that I kind of call it the digital coincidence. Um, for the better half of my career, I was really a kind of since I was like 18, 19, so I got into news media. I was really always kind of like put into the digital silo, right? I had a skill set for the technical acumen. I was really good with numbers. I can understand those things, but my career was kind of like somewhat focused around digital media. Um, and I was often leveraged to be able to speak to the digital part with print managers, print reps, whatever the case might be, and just kind of help out in that capacity. And it was really just by like I said, the digital coincidence that it was this kind of identified that Richard's actually really good at being able to humanize digital. He really kind of, brings it to the forefront of making sure that people not only understand it, but they're not, feeling as though they need to have a pressure to kind of have a better, acumen about it. He really kind of breaks it down to not only the brass tacks, but also to like how it inevitably will affect them, their customers, whatever the case might be. And therefore, it kind of took even a further step, and he's good at recognizing these behaviors not only in people but himself, and he's a really effective communicator, and therefore he should be in influential manager positions, and that's kind of what propelled me. I was kind of fit into this bit of a purple squirrel type of for lack of a better analogy profile where he's a digital guy, but he's also a technical guy, but he's really good at finances, so he understands the operations, the revenue, but he's really good at sales. And he knows a little bit about marketing. So, one of the things that actually Steve Lyles taught me was, you try and be what you're feeling as though it's missing within an organization or department. If there's too much carrot, you have to be the stick sometimes. If there's too much stick, sometimes you have to be the carrot. You be that balancing act for what you feel is missing. So I would do that with every department that I was working with. So sometimes in marketing, it's always very, very great idea generation, always very great design concept. But sometimes kind of like it was liking that how do we sell to market? How do we kind of influence the rest of the pool of salespeople? Sometimes on the technical side, it was very black and white. Okay, here is why this is happening, and therefore this is what the output's going to be. Okay, well, how do we kind of like communicate this to a broader audience? How do we what are the pieces that they need to know and what they don't need to know, because it'll get too hairy. And I just kind of kept going with it. I really started to understand the business of news media, and I always encourage people, that's kind of the place that you start because it tells the quickest story. But I just loved it. I just fed off of it, and I think that a combination of skill sets, just with the mentors that I had, and just the natural general curiosity of like how this particular industry, this been so good to me, worked. It just propelled me into managing, people, and I really never take that for granted at all. So I just want to show you guys a little bit of like what I observed and what I've learned, and therefore inevitably so that it can be delivered to somebody else. Peeling it back a little bit. So the reason I kind of like wanted to speak to the ideology of being able and having the skill set to manage cross-generational, across generations, and being able to kind of bring people together. Is because it's a skill set that I believe is going to become more and more important to being able to drive output and objectivity in the long term. The reason being is that I think that our business, our industry, it moves so rapidly anyway. And this is kind of a rare time in history where we have so many generations working with each other, and it's tricky. It's people it's kind of harder to make a culture. And in some cases, it's even hard to kind of like stay steadily focused due to the fact that there's so many moving parts all the time. But I've always felt that like legends of leadership and the managers who really kind of like stuck out, and the GM presidents who really kind of been doing this for a long time, have done a great job of being able to almost retransform themselves throughout generations. And I think that it's propelled them into, driving revenue growth, it's propelled them into enhancing, vibrant department, just flow, it feels good. It helps with the retention as well. And then naturally just the sustainability and longevity of the organization itself. So without being too heavy handed, I believe that this particular skill set is kind of the root of our future, being able to cross generationally, communicate important objectives and focus, and bringing it back down to human empathy and understand what people are going through, so that we can ultimately kind of like ride this boat together to the same destination and get to where we need to. And it's one that I've seen done very well. It's one that I've seen, that I've seen not done so well. It's one that I've been a part of. It's one, it's a concept that I've really tried to hone myself. And it's tricky, for some it's very easy, for some it's a little bit harder. But I've always felt that the universe kind of, like I said, just gives to those who gives to the universe. And our roles, I think, in leadership in news media is to literally not only, manage those that are in our generation before us, but also to kind of get things ready for a next generation also. And like I said, the veterans, the people that, the leaders that have been doing this for so long have done a really excellent job of being able to just kind of transcend their departments into just an ever evolving, ball of focus, and making sure that everybody kind of like not only understands their roles, but understands their responsibilities, which I'll get into a little bit later, and that they always kind of just perform. A little bit of a bonus importance, tremendous value in cross-generational learning. I was so thankful that I had so many mentors and great people to learn from, just not only from like generations before me, but generations ahead of me as well. Being able to fine tune your skill set, no matter what meeting you're in. I know we're talking about news media today, but being able to fine tune your skill sets and communication and closing and just technical acumen. It's hugely valuable to a department to understand kind of like the community history, for your department to understand community history, for them to understand like new technological communication touch points, for everybody to kind of understand like advertiser behaviors, and for everybody to understand how revenue. There's a huge benefits to that, because it almost, as a leader, alleviates or reprieves you a little bit of having to kind of like wear that burden yourself so much, and then you can instill confidence in your department, your organization, your teammates, whatever the case might be, your colleagues, and knowing that they know the same information that you do, and that everybody's kind of on the same plane and going to evolve into this profitability ship, and making sure that, okay, well, I understand like what makes the capture interesting, so to speak, and they're on your team. They become a part of your team, and therefore you're working with them and for them, and not necessarily just they working for you. And that was one of the most eye-opening experiences, structurally experiences that I discovered early on in my career as a leader, and just being okay with, communicating objectives like that across the board, so that everybody kind of understands the overall organizational objectives. Denise, are there any questions? I want to make sure that I don't miss people.
No, we're good.
Okay, cool. So where to start? Now that we kind of established, okay, Richard, I get it. It's important. Big deal. Okay. What do you want to do? The first thing you do, and I can't emphasize this part enough, we have to break the subconscious partiality. And I know it's going to sound like womp womp, like, okay, Rich, like we know that, but it is a big deal. And I think it all has to start with, as a leader, your ability to kind of recognize that trauma exists across generations, right? And trauma ain't good things, but for the most part, we'll talk about the negative part. But the trauma, distress, grief, it across all generations, and to be more not to put too fine a point on, but it's more about the knowing that people across all ages, all genders, all creeds, we're all going through different things, right? And it kind of is, it hinges on your ability as a leader to be able to kind of recognize and naturally empathize with people as to what they're going through. You know, I just told you, you know, obviously, you know, Royce and Steve are deceased, but that affected me because they were very close mentors and leaders. But they, you know, they passed during a time where I lost both of my grandmothers. My cousins committed suicide. You know, my uncle passed away. You know, I was going through so many different things just at home. I have two small guys, two small toddlers. Where, you know, I had one child, literally, my youngest son's birthday was February 25th, 2020. That has a whole different stress level because it was in the brink of the pandemic. You know, once I started to kind of understand that no matter what stage you are in life, somebody's going through something, it kind of started to break down the barriers of, and I'm going to say this somewhat lightly, but I know that it does exist. You have to kind of like stop believing that, you know, trauma has level. I know that trauma does have to a degree, but, you know, somebody's trauma isn't necessarily greater than, or you have to just kind of like break it. Everybody's going through something. You know, right now, you know, my uncle was just telling me the other day they're going through with my grandparents that, you know, Richard, how do you tell your parents that you got to take away their keys because they can't drive anymore? It's very hard to do. It's not trauma, but it's stress. You know, it's something that you have to go through. You know, I've literally managed people who, you know, I've obviously gotten sick from the pandemic, but severely have been diagnosed with very severe, you know, cases of things that are not COVID related, or, you know, even people who are in their early 20s. You know, it may seem as though at first hand, there's like, you know, they're coming out of schools with $120,000 in debt. That's stress. That's a lot of stress. So once you kind of can empathize and recognize, you don't necessarily always, you're not there, right? I don't have kids right now that are in college, or, you know, teenagers who may be dealing with mental disorders or suicide. You know, I'm not dealing with that, as, you know, right now. But you can still empathize as a human with what's going on. And I think that once you can do that as a leader, it makes you that much more proud of the folks around you. It really does. It puts in perspective, like, you know, Katie did a great job, you know, in spite of her going through, you know, this horrible time with her divorce, or, you know, Rick did a good job, even though he's kind of going through a lot of stuff right now with Social Security and his finances, and, you know, he's just kind of having, and I'm really just trying to break down that, like, you start to kind of see people as humans a lot more like clearly, like, for what they're going through. And it really kind of like elevates you as a leader, I believe, in your appreciation for those around you. Because even if all that is going on, they still show up, they still trying to do their best. And in some cases, even a reprieve from their social lives outside of their job. But you kind of grow this confidence that, like, man, I owe them. I really, man, they're showing up for me. And once you can do that, you kind of can start to build out that confidence within your team. That you know, like, you might already have it, but it's just like that edge of, you know, man, these are some really rock solid people that just, I just want to not only love on, but I just want to say thank you to these people. And that ultimately leads to the behaviors that you ultimately want to, like, you know, do, because people do more when they feel appreciated. It's just as simple as that. And when you are genuine about it, it's just amplified. It just makes all the difference in the world. And I'll talk about some more of those little phrases later on that, you know, we've all probably used or even heard, but you kind of have to start there. Just break that partiality. Like, oh, okay, you know, yes, everybody's new, or some people are tenured, whatever the case might be, but doesn't mean that everybody's not going through something. And when you recognize that, even though they're going through things, and they're still coming here and they're showing up, putting up numbers, all this stuff, you begin to kind of grow this appreciation for everybody in your department. After that, you have to be really good at outlining departmental organizational objectives. It helps as a leader, not only to kind of like, you know, get it out on the table, it kind of keeps you accountable for what you're communicating as far as outlining what, you know, what responsibilities are. but you kind of are trying to set the stage for the culture. And when I mean culture, I mean like, okay, are you right now in a culture where it's like, okay, look, we have to kind of like, attain these objectives, and I'm a vibrancy guy. I love energy, like, and I try and give it as much as I can. And one of the reasons for that is because, I believe that, being able to feed off of each other's energy makes your day just that much more powerful and impactful. Like, I want you to get up every day feeling great. It's not going to be every day, but I'm going to do my best as your leader to kind of like bring that energy, that focus, and that detail to how can we impact every day, to a point where we're obviously kind of keeping things in perspective, but the objectives kind of have to be there to kind of like keep things in line and focus and honest about what we're trying to do. And then lastly, especially if you're like, it doesn't really matter, but if you're in a position where you're like looking to, set up a committee or a small board or some type of action team, even a management team, sales management team, news management team, whatever the case might be, you want to start kind of recognizing traits and attributes that kind of placate into that culture that you're trying to build. It's tricky. It takes time. It takes a little bit of an evolving of you and kind of an emerging of you as a leader into your team. But the one thing I will say is that it's not new, but it's harder to recognize, I think, in more of a career patterns, because and I'll give you guys perspective. Just like, think about like college coaches, I don't care what sport, they kind of get this luxury of having the ability to reinvent themselves every year because they have new students, new student athletes coming in every year that they have to learn how to communicate with, right? And maybe first year, second year, it's a little bit of the same old genre, and maybe the regime is the same, but over the course of time, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, generation, whatever the case might be, great coaches really learn to kind of recognize a lot of those attributes that they know are going to get you to some type of title, some type of championship to win. As a leader, we also kind of have to do that as well, while keeping nuance of objectives and perspectives and goals in mind. We're like, who has that? Who has the influence? Who do others kind of go to? Because these might be people that are poised for things that are a little bit bigger than what they're doing to kind of like help you amplify that culture and that message. And it exists across all generations. Every generation has different leaders. It doesn't matter. I mean, they keep coming. The universe, the world is not short of people who will never become leaders. In a lot of cases, it's just natural. In a lot of cases, it kind of like takes time to groom, but you'll be able to see very quickly who that nucleus is, and you want to find the heart of every generation. Sometimes, you can't see it right away because they don't necessarily always stand out, or maybe they do, but you kind of just really can't tell yet if they're kind of like ready for something more. But these are the people who are, the reason this is important, they're going to make your department anyway. They're going to make your organization anyway. The city just kind of has a way of creating its own levels of culture, but they're going to make it anyway. So you need to recognize that, because these are the people who you really kind of like have to have some type of insight from and with, and as to how you want to set the culture. And they're not necessarily usually, self-proclaimed, like, oh, I'm ready for this. Not all the time, so you have to really kind of sift out what's there and what's not. They do have a natural aptitude to network and, communicate. They just kind of like, those are some things there, but, that they're really good at still attaining goals. You just kind of have to find that heart of that generation to be able to kind of like propel you, propel and amplify your messaging throughout those generations, throughout that department, so that it resonates. If not, it's going to kind of happen, for you anyway. But definitely want to kind of have your eye on the ball when it comes to that. Any questions there? Okay, cool. Now, after that kind of said and done, the trickiest part, and I think that a lot of individuals kind of have trouble with this, because sometimes you're really good at it, and sometimes you're just not, and it's okay. But the coaching is it can be the good part, but it can also be the hard part as well. So you kind of really have to focus and designate time for that. And like I said before, all good mentors, leaders, coaches, they kind of have an element of being able to coach, but great to understand how to leverage the universal language. And I'll talk about that in just a second, what that is. But leading multiple generations is more about developing your relatability in that universal language. And I believe there's more to it. And obviously, I can kind of go on and on for a while. Obviously, if you understand empathy and all those things is one thing, but I believe the thing that really helped me to propel and amplify my messages, not only to people who are poised for leadership at some given point, but just in general to teams in general, is responsibility. It's kind of the crux of, I believe, what helps people. What invigorates people to kind of want to do more. Not only is your appreciation a very big deal, but when you tell somebody, I appreciate you, and that I can't do this without you, or I appreciate you, and that you're the reason that we're doing so great. When you can scale your success or the objectives and goal attainment down to individual performance or down to a person's ability to go above and beyond, whatever the case might be, and you put in perspective and you grant them that responsibility to say, hey, look, we're relying on you to do this, and you did it, it will literally, it'll change things. It'll change things for their lives. It'll change things for generations. That is universal. That's what I discovered. I don't care if they're, fresh out of school, I don't care, close to retirement. Everybody, in particular in sales, because we deal with a lot of A personalities, everybody has to feel the appreciation and responsibility. That is universal language. Great coaches, they know, okay, look, not only are you going to be wearing our brand, which is a very big deal, because I always communicate that to people who are either starting out or kind of in the middle of their career. You're about to wear this badge of this news media organization, right? It's already a big deal. But I am relying on you to be able to elevate my department to the next level with your skill set and ability to be able to do an X, Y, Z. That second half of that is kind of like, that's your milkshake. The cherry on top is the brand behind it. Your milkshake is when somebody knows that they will do a lot more. That you have to kind of instill confidence in people so that they know that not only do you have a badge leader and all that stuff, but it gives them the sense of purpose and drive. And that's a very, very important concept, I believe, when you're managing and leading multiple generations. One of the things that I always tried to do was every time that there was something good going on, or every time that there was something that may have been more of a general company statement, every weekly meeting or every one-on-one, whatever case might be, I always made a case to kind of like stop and focus on that email for that team or that person to say, listen, you saw what just came out. I just want to say it doesn't happen without you. It's a very big deal that we're there, and I appreciate that, but you alone helped your team do this. You alone did this and X, Y, and Z, and therefore we were able to do this, and therefore our revenue is this. You are helping this entire organization in some way, shape, or form. As a coach, one of the things, as a leader, as a mentor, whatever the case might be, one of the hardest things to know is when to do this. Because sometimes it's easy to just be like, all right, well, they need more stick, they need more focus, you need to do this. All that stuff is fine. At some point, though, you have to take a step back and recognize those who respond to stick a lot quicker, those who respond to affirmations, quicker, things like that. But everybody has to feel responsibility and appreciation. Cool? Questions there? All right. If that is the foundation and crux of culture, right, that you are setting as a leader across generations within your department, after you've kind of committed to, the coaching strategy, if you will, kind of like saying, hey, look, everybody's got to understand the role and the responsibilities. The missing part I found a lot either again looking outside in or just kind of like doing it myself. And I've done this, and I've messed up on this a couple of times myself. Is the education of the organization. This is also kind of if I had like a universal language part two. This is kind of that universal language, part two, because everybody can understand organizational, financial, viability and health. So you want to make sure that you kind of instill and take the time to instill the education behind, how revenue flows, the inner workings of different departments, communication tactics. What you're ultimately trying to do is ensure that they understand the decisions that they're making. I don't care if they're, customer service, sales, it doesn't matter. Everybody kind of needs to have an understanding of what makes the organization great, but also too what makes the organization healthy. It's tricky, because you don't want to do like analysis paralysis and inundate people, but you want to kind of like have a general focus of what are the key business drivers and KPIs, that are going to kind of like drive our bottom line. And I think for the most part, people understand like goals and bonuses and whatnot. I'm sorry, goals and objectives and whatnot, but you kind of almost have to give them a little bit of that peek into the back end business as well, and making sure that they understand, okay, print cost is this, subscriber rate is at this, like attention is here. So you really want to like lay this out. It may seem tedious at times, may seem a little like draining, and it'll take some time, don't get me wrong, but kind of going back to my first sentiment, it's such a relieving point for you as a leader, because you instill confidence again, furthermore, but also too, that they know what they should be doing to make good business decisions. And that's kind of one of the other things that's kind of like a capitalization, or like a again, the cherry on top for you instilling appreciation and confidence, and their already natural abilities to achieve goals and whatnot. But now you're saying, I'm giving you the confidence and responsibility of making great, responsible, business decisions for us when you're out in the field. And they don't have to be, they're not, huge, right? Like acquisition of or anything like that. But simply like, okay, you can discount here, but you don't necessarily have to do that. Or, maybe we can give them another this, and that as far as added value, because you know how much that actually costs. But you also know and understand, what other clients you're getting, and you want to make sure that we kind of get a good business deal done. But you understand our finances, so it makes it easier for you to be culpable for not only that transaction, but also too, then the day it's going to hit the books and it's going to be recognized in a certain way. So not to belabor a point, this is kind of the piece that you cannot skip. So if you're kind of going through the, task again, you're saying, okay, Richard, we're going to viciously just kind of like eliminate all unconscious or conscious, partiality. We're going to try and drive revenue. We're going to make sure that people understand their roles, responsibilities, we understand the outlines and objectives of the company. And also too, we're going to educate people on what we're doing here. This is probably the piece that's always a little uneasy sometimes. So, well, how much do we need to let them? I want to let them know everything, but you definitely cannot miss this part. Cool. All right. Eliminate everything else. I don't mean that literally, I mean more figuratively, but what you want to do is make sure that, after you just kind of like going through the steps that I was, taking you through, and kind of giving people confidence, giving people the room to be themselves and to thrive and to be fruitful in production and attain goals and objectives and whatnot. You don't want to kind of bog down too much on things that aren't necessarily kind of like, geared towards reaching and achieving those goals. In some cases, I understand, but one of the things that I've seen kind of like that can just kill that vibrancy and just kill that excitement or that invigoration after you've just done like a really great hurrah speech is kind of taking you through things that might kind of eat up more of their day to ultimately like end up at a place where it's a, sometimes I think that we as leaders can kind of put things that are in place that are like trivial or, just for no reason. Just you kind of want to do your best as a leader to kind of like eliminate everything else. If it's not helping them in some way, shape, or form get to those goals, I'm not saying limit, just question, even that's question, and then you can kind of like make the decision across the board to say, hey, look, it's something that we should continue doing because it's just not really like it's eating up too much of their day, or they're really not kind of like getting out of it what we thought. I don't want to be too heavy-handed with it, but they can also kind of be a bit of a culture killer sometimes as well. Not too much, but just make sure that it's definitely in the back of your mind. So again, just to kind of like reiterate, always make sure, always make sure that those steps again, just kind of like eliminating partiality in your departments. If you're trying to grow revenue, if you're at a place where you're trying to grow revenue, if you're at a place where you're trying to inject that culture, if you're trying in a place where you're trying to retain or onboard and retain new employees, and you're committed to this idea, you have to kind of like eliminate the subjective and the unconscious and conscious partiality. You have to make sure that you are outlining your goals and objectives the proper way. You have to make sure that you're giving affirmation. You have to make sure that you're giving the roles and responsibilities of your department in regards to outlining the responsibilities. Outlining exactly, that responsibility and how it correlates to the bigger picture and the objective. And lastly, just make sure that you're coaching and educating whenever you can. Those universal languages and those sentiments are a very big deal. We can't do this without you. You're important to what we're doing. You're affecting the bigger number. It all kind of like plays into how you can objectively as a leader, not only sustain yourself throughout generations, but you can, simplify things down to kind of be able to amplify your communication across generations as you develop your team, your staff, your building, whatever the case might be. Thank you guys so very much. I know we're got some more time here, so I want to make sure that if there's any kind of like question, dialogue, I kind of like left some time for them in particular. Again, I'm thankful for all the people and mentors that I've had in my life. Really thankful for the opportunity to just have this conversation with you guys. But is there any questions that you have for me or anything like you want to kind of like run through?